続いては国民時間移転勘定 NTTA 概要と10年の経験からの教訓と題しまして、カリフォルニア大学バークレー校経済学と高齢化の人工学センター学術専門職グレッチェン・ドーネハワー様よりご発表いただきたいと思います。So Dr. Donehower, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you organizers for the invitation. I am honored to be included here to tell you about the Counting Women's Work Project and National Time Transfer Accounts. You've already heard a little bit about them. I'll give you some more background and then what we have learned in the 10 years that this project has been ongoing. So there is a serious limitation to national accounts that comes from being based, from national transfer accounts that comes from its basis on national accounts. And that is because national accounts covers the market. Market work in national accounts is defined as work for pay or unpaid work to produce goods consumed by the household that produces them. So national accounts calls this production of goods for own final use. So that's a picture. This is an average across a diverse set of 20 countries of the amount of time spent per week on this market work. So work for pay, work to produce goods for own consumption. But we all know from our own lives that that's not the only kind of work that people do. There is more to production than market production. So what you see here is an average, again, across these 20 diverse countries. You'll see all the names in a later graph. So that is the average amount of time people spend each week on unpaid care work. And that includes direct care for persons, children, elders, sick or disabled persons, but also the indirect care that keeps our households running. Cooking, cleaning, household management, things like that. And so what we see is that in terms of the scale, how much market labor is produced compared to the time that we all spend doing unpaid care work, it is a huge amount of our productive energies that goes into this sector that is outside of national accounts. For NTA purposes, where we're always concerned with age effects, you can see there's also a difference in the age incidence of this kind of work. We do a lot more of it than we do market work at the oldest ages. So we don't retire from this type of work. So measurement matters. So national statistics in this small table, 2 columns for goods versus services, 2 rows for those goods and services traded in the market for money versus non-market. So what is included in national accounts? So in that top row, market goods and services are included. And in the bottom left, non-market goods are also included. So that is that production for own use. So when subsistence agriculture grows food that is consumed by a household, that national accountants guess at that amount and the value of it and include it in the estimates. Similarly, when your house provides you a place to live, national accountants have tools to estimate the value of that good, of that housing. Now, services, non-market services, are the part that is left out. And the social scientist Indira Hirway from India, I felt had the best example of where this process leaves you. So imagine a potato, a household that's growing potatoes to consume themselves. So the value of the seed, the value of the land, the value of the family workers who till the soil and harvest the potato is all included in national accounts. We dig up the potato, we take it to the door of the household, and the measurement ends. So unless you want to eat a raw potato, there's more to the story in terms of taking something that we consume and producing value from it. So why is this a gender issue? Because women specialize on average in the square that is left out. So NTA was aware of this issue from the very beginning and always wanted to add gender as an analytical dimension. And we knew that we also had to add unpaid care work. So that's why we developed national time transfer accounts. So developed by the Counting Women's Work Project, that was our first sort of funded effort to develop this methodology. And of course, we were not the first people to point out this omission in national accounts. And actually, Dr. Lai has the pictures of, or Roger Stone and other people who develop national accounts. And you can read in their reports in that work where they were discussing what to do with this household production, with these unpaid household services. And the discussion basically said, it's hard to measure and we don't really know where to put this thing, so we will just leave it out and leave that for future generations to figure out. So future generations come along and they develop household production satellite accounting to use time use surveys to estimate how much time people spend in unpaid care work. And again, in those two distinct types, direct care and indirect care. And then to value that time by an imputed market wage to get some sort of value estimate that would go along with the monetary valuations from national accounts. So that methodology already existed. What national time transfer accounts brought to it was NTA's age perspective. So we add the age dimension, and we also impute consumption and transfers of this unpaid service, unpaid care work. So household production satellite accounting was just about estimating the production side, but NTA also brings our techniques to understand the consumption of this type of service. So now I'm going to take you through a series of graphs to have an overview of what we have learned in the approximately 10 years that as a network we have been working on these estimates. We do not have 100 countries yet with NTTA, whereas we have that number from NTA, but we are getting there and we shall get there. So for this diverse group of 20 countries, you can see the names over there on the side. There are 4, 5, or 6 from each of our 4 main regions: Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and then North America and Europe sort of grouped together. So the first chart is meant to demonstrate that unpaid care work is large in terms of the total productive time. So I showed that graph in the beginning, but here is for a group of individual countries. So the proportion of total work hours spent on unpaid care work is in red, market work is in blue. So we have up there in Spain, it's about 60% of the total productive time is going to unpaid care work. All the way down at the bottom, Cote d'Ivoire, it's about 20%. And sort of sorting in the middle, we get to about half and half on average. So we also have learned that unpaid care work is large in terms of its economic value. So this shows you ratios for a group of countries, smaller because I don't have monetary estimates for all of these countries, how the total unpaid care work valued at a market wage compares to GDP. So up at the top, we have Germany and Italy. It's about 60% of GDP. Down at the bottom, Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana are a little bit above 10%. So this is a vast range. A lot of this has to do with dynamics of the imputed wage. So Germany and Italy have very high minimum wages, and they have relatively small informal sectors. So most of the people who would be doing this work actually would make this legal minimum wage. Whereas down in other countries, there's a very large informal sector, and those domestic services in particular are very low paid. So this is not to say that this is the value of unpaid care work, but this is at least what we would account it as using this methodology. Now, we also know that GDP is not just about the labor production. GDP also has a large portion of the productive capacities of capital. But the National Time Transfer Accounts does not have that. So here is maybe a more fair comparison. So this is the aggregate unpaid care work compared to the aggregate labor income. And so we see this same kind of range, or the same kind of distribution of countries at different levels, but now the range along the bottom axis is up here. Some of those countries with those highest wages, the value of unpaid care work is actually above what is estimated for labor income. Now, another thing that we've learned, or at least I've learned for 2 countries so far, I hope to replicate this for more countries, is that most of this kind of care work is done on an unpaid basis. So we know that we can purchase care services in the market. I can send my children to daycare. I can hire a nanny. If I have an elderly relative I need to care for, I could hire an in-home health care. So in trying to understand the total care economy, paid and unpaid, I made these 2 charts for the United States and for Korea, looking at just the direct care portion of the care economy. So direct care for persons. So up in green is the number of hours as a proportion of total hours done by paid care workers who are more credentialed. So these are doctors and teachers, nurses, things like that, people who have to do a great deal of education and sort of pass certain regulatory tests in order to have those professions. The small sliver in red is for less credentialed paid care workers. These are typically child care workers or in-home health aides. Those professions typically have a less strict requirements and lower amounts of education required to do those things. Now, in the blue is the total amount of direct care that's produced for no pay, mostly by family members. So we can see in both of these countries, and I'd imagine more as I keep on trying to replicate this for other nations, that most of the care economy, at least in the direct care realm, exists on an unpaid basis. So far, unpaid care work is large in terms of time, in terms of value. Most of it is unpaid, and now we see that most of it is done by women. So this is a larger group of countries. The total amount of unpaid care work proportion done by men in blue and women in red. So up there, Senegal has the widest gap, for about 90 and 10%. And then even at the bottom, Denmark is about 30-70. So especially Denmark, Sweden, those Scandinavian countries we think of as being sort of the most gender egalitarian, still have large gaps in this kind of work. And to be fair, if I put the same chart up for paid work, we would see the opposite. So another thing we've learned about unpaid care work, which is particularly relevant for NTA, is that it is a large part of human capital investment. So this little donut represents human capital inputs during the first year of life. In orange is the market goods and services that an infant consumes in terms of health and education. Education would be sort of things like daycare, but. And then in green is the unpaid care work, so direct care for infants. We can see that sort of over a larger range of ages in this chart, which I should have put, comes from work done by Lily Varga and I. So in green, so this is per capita from age 0 to 25, how much expenditure on children in these important human capital development aspects. So the green is direct unpaid care work. The blue and the red are market inputs of health and education. So we can see in the first year of life, it's almost all unpaid care work. That's the 90%, 10% division on that last slide. And as a child gets older, those shares shift. We have less of an unpaid care input, more of a market input. But imagine, as we've heard other policy inputs saying that the state has no role in human capital development until you reach age 5. That's a pretty long time to wait to invest in your future workers, especially when you know you'll have relatively few of them. So this next chart, and it's probably tiny, sorry for all of you. So what I wanted to show in this picture was how unpaid care work changes our perception of who is expensive or who is dependent. So the blue and the red lines are different kinds of deficits, so consumption less production. For blue, it's those market goods and services life cycle deficit, the regular NTA life cycle deficit. And in red, it's the deficit in terms of unpaid care, both direct and indirect. So I've sort of made the axis ranges overlap so that you could see the different shapes. So in the blue lines, there's a large deficit at the youngest ages and a large deficit at the oldest ages. But on the red lines, there's the largest deficit at the youngest ages, but relatively less, much less, at the oldest ages. So what this shows is that kids are expensive. Kids are time expensive and market goods and services expensive. Older persons, however, are incredibly productive. When this red line is close to 0, that means that age group is producing as much as it's consuming in unpaid care work. So this is grandparents taking care of grandchildren. It's one spouse taking care of another spouse. So this is, I think, very important in showing the productive capacities of older persons and shifting our discussion of aging away from just older persons are going to be burdens. So before I get into some of my specific policy points, just a general point that some of the impact of this work is about ideational change. It's not about sort of having 5% more childcare. It's about seeing something that is generally invisible to us, that is very easy to ignore. So that is one of the important things that the time transfer accounts and also NTA bring to the table. That part of what this contributes is a different perspective and a different kind of conversation about the life course, about unpaid care work, than you could have without these pictures. But some more specific policy implications might be that, and I believe Professor Matsukura mentioned this, but that policies to increase labor force participation in an aging world, we need to find more workers, but they have to recognize the work people are already doing in terms of unpaid care work. The invisibility of women's work can lead to policy mistakes. Whoops, should have made that go silent. And there's a big list there. And also, I think it's important to realize right now that pro-natalist policy also has to contend with the costs of unpaid care work. When we think about increasing a child tax credit, if all we're counting in the size of that credit is the market goods and services for, say, the first 3 years of life, we are undershooting the target. We are not going to get the sort of response that we hope for. Also, by taking this life course perspective, we can realize that some of these policies are way too short-term compared with the length of investment that parents are undertaking. Also that governments are maybe not trustworthy in terms of keeping up that investment as long as they're going to need. So maybe some policy like baby bonds, where a government puts aside money for each child that will be given to them later on to sort of invest in getting their life going, that solves some of this time horizon problem. So what to do? Gather more time use data. That is becoming much more prevalent around the world, which is a good thing. And then embed the care economy into policy and planning frameworks and documents. Thank you.